Okay.
Hi, Susan.
Hey, Bonnie, how are you?
I'm great. It is so great to see you. I'm glad we could talk about
Yeah.
you and your work. And I just want to tell people watching and listening that I have been an admirer of your work because of the our introduction through Crit Lab and seeing your work there. And that's a space where we share our work and our concepts, our desires, our interests, our history, and it's just intrigued me because you speak about your work so well, and also um, the fact that you're doing a lot with performance. That
Mhm.
has always intrigued me because it's something that seems a little scary to me. And how does a person start in with that, like, and it's not like you started yesterday. You've been doing this all your life. You've been making art. You've been expressing yourself in ways that feel natural and important to you and about your life. And so that just really intrigued me. And that's why I really wanted to start this platform where I get to know artists better. And you're my first artist that I wanted to talk to. And I understand you're in San Francisco or in the Bay Area, and
Yeah.
that you're going to tell us a little bit about what you're doing out there, how long you've been there, a little bit about yourself, and we'll just see where it all goes.
Thank you, Bonnie. It's been such a pleasure talking to you about art ideas. And I think that for much of my life, I haven't had the beautiful moments to actually talk to other artists about art concepts. So it's been a real treat to me to be able to be in dialogue around things like materials and its context in the world stage. And I think I was happy to say yes to this opportunity to chat
Yeah.
on the video machine because it's actually been such a rarity for me. And you've asked such good questions. And I really appreciate that. It was a catalyst for me to think more beautifully and more deeply about things I've been doing for a very long time.
Good. So
So,
I just want to tell people that again that are watching and listening that, as we talked about doing this, and I should also say that, I'm calling this series Art Heads after you having mentioned that in one of our talks. But I just like the term a lot because our minds are in our art so many hours. And
mhm.
um, but it's true that, we've gotten a chance to dialogue about the work, and it's a wonderful release to give feedback and to ask questions. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
So much of what we're doing is in our heads and
Right.
in our materials. So to have little moments in which we bring language to it, and I've always had a fondness for words as well. So uh, uh, the there's a certain deliciousness to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you
Mhm.
always been writing? Has that been part of your life from early on?
So, yes, and let me go backwards a little bit because there may be three people wondering about like the Bay Area
Sure.
and coming out here. And I've been out here since the early 80s. Uh, from
Awesome.
college in Appleton, Wisconsin. I had a short rest in Oklahoma City where my sweetheart was my boss. And he's remained my sweetheart for the remaining years since then. And we came to the Bay Area never having been here before, not really knowing more than two people. I knew two people from college who were out here. So it was sort of an adventure and a leap of faith. But and at first, I was very disconcerted by there not being seasons because I'm a Chicago girl.
Yeah.
But I love plants and things that grow. And the first number of years out in the Bay Area, I was in the flower business.
Oh,
And I went from being in the wholesale flower business to having my own design business where it was actually a little more esoteric than just the normal flower shop. We did a lot of natural sculptural installations and uh, did a lot of events and like if I needed to do holiday decorations for someone in a fancy neighborhood, I would bring instead of evergreens and red bows and you know candy canes, I would bring birch trunks of birch wood,
yeah.
and I would have them wrapped in lights, and I did make leaves out of pieces of copper that I had oxidized to be a beautiful shade of green. So it would be bringing in sort of a tree-like element, but
Yeah.
bringing in the wrong type of tree, and but with the same twinkly lights
Yeah.
and many moments like that
That's
were in
that's
my
fascinating.
years as a flower business person.
That's fascinating. And would your clients know that you were going to surprise them with these things? Or, I mean, they wouldn't know that they would be surprised, but would they?
So always the best clients are, yeah, always the best clients are the clients who are artists themselves or appreciate art.
Mhm.
And who are willing to give you permission to do what you do without constraints. There were plenty of boring Christmas trees,
Mhm.
plenty, but that's not what I remember.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's fascinating.
yeah,
Were you
yeah.
able to, were you working at that time making artwork, paintings, printmaking, any of your
No,
things like that?
well, so I was making things like floral things that could be worn. Or I made a whole set of wire crowns and uh, I was making natural objects, some of them performative, some of them uh, uh, setting the scene for a party. But
So
yeah,
the performance piece was in there somehow that time.
yeah, 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 yeah. And the creative practice and it was it wasn't your normal flower shop. It was more of a creative studio whose main ingredient was natural
That's
stuff.
fascinating. And so that's awesome. And did the two of you do that, or was this solely your
I had my own business, but I also had a partner, and we worked together. A woman who I love dearly, who has since passed away, and yeah, we were a fabulous team for a number of years.
oh, that is fantastic.
Mhm.
And then obviously you've left that business.
I left that, and then over a number of years, ended up being a working as a teaching artist, and pretty quickly went from being a teaching artist to being an artist who teaches teachers.
Mhm.
Uh, and I did that for many years and was particularly good at being the translator between learning and understanding and making of things. And my teacher friends who know me uh, that they saw a special slice of what was possible with thinking and understanding for themselves and for their classrooms. So,
Well, I love this. This just opens my mind up so much because I mean, it's a breath of fresh air to think
mhm,
like you were doing this with these tree parts. And I could just imagine you applying your wonderful openness to other possibilities, thinking out of the box,
mhm,
to everything that you do. And
yeah,
I imagine that people who have been in a, you know, a construct that is supposed to be you do this, this, this,
Mhm.
and here you come, and
Right.
you're kind of like saying, yes, we can all do this, but we could do
Mhm.
it in
Yeah.
any way we choose. Yeah.
I I had to unlearn a lot in order to show up correctly for teachers and students.
Mm.
I was largely working with the teachers in the Bay Area, but in Oakland. So in Oakland, it's a particularly frenetic, diverse, challenging, energetic, beautiful community. And very few of the teachers have ever thought of themselves as an artist. So for them to be able to lead with art practice,
Oh,
they had to be given strategies that were very approachable. So say you're reading some sort of book about history, or maybe it's fiction, but dealing with something, personalities and identity. So a good match to that would be to do rubbings,
mm-hmm.
where you put paper over a surface and you have a wide crayon or a wide lead piece, and you reveal what's under the surface by rubbing the paper. So you are literally asking what's below the surface while you're thinking about what's below the surface in the narrative of the story or the history or the conflict that you're trying um, to relate to and to understand. So
And this is the way they sort of brought their students into the conversation.
absolutely, because a lot of their students were just learning English as a second language. So if you don't have a modality
Uh,
that is an alternative to the
yes.
the language, you're 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 lost.
Yeah.
You're searching.
Yeah. There's no communication.
Yeah,
This is a way to communicate.
yeah, yeah. So that was very interesting. But it also informs how I think about my art practice. It's very um, head heavy.
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking about process and intent and outcome and the systems that are maybe overshadowing desired outcomes. And uh, I very much need my art practice in order to exist as a human being.
Yeah.
If I didn't have it, I think that uh, I hate to think of what my life would be alternatively. It's essential for me to be able to have something for my hands to do, something that's an artifact as a result. And sometimes it's just 15 minutes in my sketchbook. And because of that, those 15 minutes, I'm a better human being.
Yes, I know when I don't have time in the studio, I get very
Mhm.
frustrated and very wound up, and
Yeah,
it just doesn't feel very good at all. So I can
yeah,
totally agree. Plus, I think I noticed that in you is that, this and many artists. I mean, there's no like, oh, I do art and the I'm this person and the rest of it. I mean, we're artists always.
yeah,
So it's not it's not something separate. So,
yeah,
and I'm like, that's the soul of what, I think, you what I recognized in you. Like that's, it's the real deal. And then I think too, like some of the things that I learned about you, like from your history of, and your mom and growing up with, like we're going to talk about, the sense of care and caring and carrying, but
mm,
the way some of the things that like I'd like you to go into a little bit, which we only touched on, if you
mhm,
feel comfortable doing that, was, just like, you said your mom was like an anything goes and like this, like I'm so curious about that atmosphere because
mhm,
I think, when you grow up in something that's maybe different, everybody has different from everybody else, but when you really come down to it, but different in a way that's, you know, has its own special flavor to it. Uh,
Mhm.
you see, you're open to things in a way that maybe a lot of people are not, because you've grown up in a condition in conditions that are not
Mhm.
typical.
Yeah,
So I would like to hear a little bit, like, I mean, when you're ready, to bring that in,
yeah.
um, a little bit about how, because now we're talking about how you know, how you applied yourself to education and caring.
Mhm, mhm,
Want
mhm.
to see where that goes.
So, it's hard to tell this story with any sense of brevity,
Mhm.
uh, but it's a story that I want to honor. Um, I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, so I had the resources that I needed. I had the comforts of shelter, and my elementary school had art teachers and music teachers, and we were free. We weren't worried as much about the threats of potential harm. We were out on our bikes, wandering, visiting friends. Cell phones didn't exist. We'd come home for dinner. Uh,
And
and it was beautiful. But at home, uh, as a young child, with my two sisters, my mother started to really struggle with her mental health.
mm,
And for years, off and on, she was hospitalized and labeled with terms like bipolar, schizophrenia, tons of medications, electroshock therapy, hospitalizations. She'd come home, she'd be foggy, uh, but somehow my dad cobbled together someone to take care of us after school, and somehow a sense of I hate to use the word normalcy because I actually despise it as a notion. I think that we're sort of burdened by the idea that there is a normal.
right.
I'm much more interested in like the spectrum of like nonlinear thinking is fascinating
Fascinating.
and it's beautiful. And after many years of being medicated and cycling through good times and bad times, my dad passed away. Uh, that's a whole nother story.
Yes.
Uh, he was a person who believed in me and loved me. And so I'm lucky to have had one person like that in my upbringing that believed in me. That I've taken that a long, long way.
And
But he,
that you felt
yeah, yeah, but he was struggling with his own sort of hidden identity. He was a closeted gay man, and he died in 94 of AIDS and lung cancer. So, like, there was a lot of not normal going on in my household. And when my mom would be hospitalized, no one in the neighborhood delivered lasagna.
right,
Like, if you have a heart attack or if you break a leg,
right.
there was a whole network of care. But if it's crazy care, it's like, it's safer to stay away, perhaps. I don't know. Things are a little different now.
I think people are afraid. And it might be a little different, but it might not be a lot different,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
had that been
yeah.
happening today.
So I became very good at translating nuances
Yeah,
and witnessing when things were okay and what was it that turned things to be not okay. Especially once I moved my mom out here to the Bay Area. Like Berkeley was great for her because you can be a weirdo in Berkeley, you know, and it has some smaller town vibes so that, neighbors, when they would see her doing something that was concerning, would give me a call. And, there was a bit of a web of care for her, but I couldn't sign on to a job that was like steady.
Yeah.
So for me, being a teaching artist where I could have smaller gigs
Yeah.
was much more ideal
It's
to
more
being a
flexible.
caregiver.
Yes.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So I always had to search for those, that type of work,
Yeah.
and always needed to balance needing to step away and out of myself into a sort of s- uh, uh, scope of care for people around me, whether it was my son or my family or my mother or, extended family members. So um, it was a beautiful but heavy lift. And in Berkeley, I worked hard to have my mom's medications lowered as much as they possibly could, to be on that edge of being um, creative
Yeah.
without being dangerous.
Okay.
Uh, we crossed over that line a number of times, but
Yeah.
that was my job. So I really like that space. I like that space that allows for being as creative as possible.
Well, that is such a gift to her that you
Yeah, yeah,
because I mean it could have been more uh just you know enough to like just put that away, like let's cover that up, but you
yeah,
did you really took the time and energy to respect
yeah,
the individual.
yeah, yeah.
So that's
It,
beautiful.
it, it takes more time to listen more carefully
Hmm.
and to ask clarifying questions.
Hmm.
Uh, but she could almost always explain where she was coming from. And it was like, oh, now I get it.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
I kind of get that to some degree. I mean, I didn't have the same circumstances, obviously, but um, being a teacher for many years, educator, and
Hmm.
I, sometimes you meet people that cross your path and, you know, the words that are said and what's really happening,
Hmm.
might be very different things. And it is important to kind of, and when you've done it a number of years, you can hear
Yeah,
the difference. You can hear when there's something missing. So
yeah,
yeah. So that's yeah, and part of that is that you've, had to sense those moments that were scary. Then as she got older, you were able to use that as like, oh, here's a point of entry or
yeah, yeah,
scary point. So and your sisters as well, you've had to
yeah,
kind of manage,
yeah,
care for.
yeah.
And so I mean the time in Berkeley, that's changed over the years with people, with school, with environment,
Yeah.
socially. Like,
Hmm.
I mean,
Hmm.
that was I've only been out to San Francisco once, had an amazing
Hmm.
time.
Yeah,
And I always wish that I was more in that era, like in the hub of that kind of atmosphere. But I was in the suburbs in Pennsylvania.
yeah, yeah.
But I mean,
It
we were
it
all
remains
yeah.
right. It remains a community that is not frightened to protest.
Hmm.
And I really appreciate that. And that if there's something that stinks, people are going to show up, and the work is going to be done, and signs will be in windows, and there's a web of care uh, by the community itself rather than an outside source being
Yeah.
tasked with coming in and fixing things. And there are a lot of messes right now. Housing is a real issue.
Mm.
Uh, yeah, there's a lot of need right now.
and that fits with who you are, and like why you're out there, why that feels like the right place for you.
Mhm. Yeah.
So that's so I mean that kind of brings us, I kind of feel like I'd like to share some of the images at this
We
point.
haven't even shared any images yet. We better get going.
Let's do it. Okay, so I'm going to share screen, and because we've talked about, uh care and caring and carrying, these are great next images to start off with. So you can see this okay?
Yeah, it looks beautiful. I see three versions of myself, and these are self-portraits. They're taken with a timer on a camera on a tripod. And what I'm wearing is a mask. I call it a mask that I made. There was a book in the library, an old book that had a beautiful illustration of wolf, moss, lichen. And when you go up into the Sierras, there's a chartreuse colored moss that hangs to the trees at certain altitudes. It's my favorite color, that sort of chartreuse green.
Mm-hmm.
So when I saw this illustration, I thought, oh, I love that.
Mm.
And at the time, I was going through a period of trying to teach myself things. So at a local organization, Kala Art Institute, I took a class on large-scale digital printing.
Oh,
So I scanned this image that was in a book illustrating wolf moss. By the way, my last name is Wolf,
right.
so it has a particular humor to it. Not only is it a color of moss that I love, it shares the same last name. And it's used by indigenous uh, tribal members as a natural dye uh, for clothes and other woven materials. So I taught myself how to make a large digital file and print the media on paper, and then I cut out the perimeter of the moss and added a head mount to the back side, and I began to take these series of self-portraits. So one of the humorous things to this process is that if you're going to the camera and pressing the shutter timer for 10 seconds or whatever, you're also wearing this mask that doesn't have any eye holes in it.
Yeah.
So you're functioning blind and you're guessing that your pose is an appropriate one. That's what all of these are from. And these were taken in my living room. But I also took this mask out to different locations where wolf moss is found and took some natural, situated in a natural environment, self-portraits wearing the wolf moss mask.
It's awesome. And were you particularly aware of, like, I'm looking at your hands now
Mhm.
and I'm seeing some pattern. And then I'm also wondering about the clothes that you wore. Those were chosen obviously for,
Sure,
yeah.
sure. I mean, the left, it's pajamas, and in the middle, the pajamas under a skirt.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the on the far left, the sweater I'm wearing is very similar to the color of wolf moss.
Yes.
So, and the gloves a friend had given me, they're like crocheted,
Oh, I see.
very fancy gloves.
Okay.
So I was being fancy.
Yeah. I mean, the hands are so, like, in the center one, like really prominent,
Mhm.
or at least seems to me
Yeah,
in this image. And so, yeah, made me curious.
yeah.
Yeah, nice. So let's look at your next. So here we have a video, and we're going to watch that real quick.
Okay.
Wonderful. So I'm going to go to this image, but uh, yeah. So well, let's go to the next ones, and then I'll stop share after a
Okay,
couple. Okay. So
great.
anything you want to tell us about this one?
Well, this was during the pandemic, and I call this series of images uh, with and through the pandemic portal. And the location is in a park where in normal times there would have been many children laughing and playing. It's where summer camp is held.
Mm.
This is a beautiful lean-to structure where materials are stored, but there's also this beautiful stage created by these doors that can open or be closed. And there's a bench in front of the
Oh, okay.
doors. It was a perfect stage, and no one was anywhere, so it was incredibly private. And uh, I think that I was performing in the space and holding the grief and the change and the isolation and the
Mm. Yeah, I think that's amazing. You can, I'm smart that you use your body to feel these things.
yeah, yeah.
And then I've told you before, I mean, I don't know how you feel about it, but this image to me says so
Mhm.
much. It's the,
This this was also the pandemic was still, a thing, but up north of here, around an hour away, there's a space, artist residency space called In Cahoots Residency. And I had been there before, and she, of course, had had like cancellations and had to close down the residency. And she just had gotten to the point where she felt like she could invite artists up if they wanted to come. And I was like, hell yes, I'm ready. This was when I was just beginning my current body of work about care and caring. So I was prototyping a bunch of things.
Mhm.
Like, was this idea as an artist about wanting to honor the labor of caring and caring? Did it mean that there were objects that needed to be made and carried, or did it mean something else? I wasn't quite sure. So you can see that I sort of use some clips and brads to bring form to this stiff paper that was sort of like a big burden, but really I was just wanting to sort of embody the gestures of a heavy weight being carried
Right.
uh, in this space where the field where the residency was held. So
Yes.
I set up my little camera on my little tripod with my 10-second timer, and this is the result of one of those.
That's wonderful.
Mhm.
Should we move on, or do you want to stop? I could stop
Well,
recording for a second.
briefly, let me tell the story of that one video
That's
that
what I was
had
gonna
the shaker.
ask. Yeah, that's wonderful, and I love the seeing, some people walking across in the back.
Right.
Yeah,
Hilarious.
yeah.
Just hilarious, right? So, I did 10 performances using these bags. And these bags are made to haul foodstuffs or landscaping materials. And they're industrial bags, very, very strong, and they're unique in that their handles are generally used for a forklift to go through the handles and then carry them.
Okay,
Um, there's a gusseted opening at the top where material it fills it, and there's also a gusseted portal at the bottom where the material would be delivered.
okay,
Ingenious, right?
yes,
One day there was a construction project in my neighborhood, and I saw these bags lined up, and I thought, those are great. And I watched them over the next week or so, and I saw the forklift. It was actually like
yeah,
a dance performance, the forklifts
yeah,
carrying these bags, and
yeah.
splendid. So I had a friend, a great friend, who was willing to do some dumpster diving. And there was one day that they were all tossed in the dumpster, and I pulled, with Jim's help, pulled them out. And, there was an identifier on them where they came from, which was not that far away, just outside of Sacramento. So I used some of the bags just to begin from the dumpster, but I also ordered a full set of, I think, a dozen of them.
Mm,
They
fantastic.
generally they don't sell these bags in fewer than 1,000. So, to get a call from them that they actually had some, I had to drive there and pick them up. But
That's great.
they're these fantastic objects because I was able to wiggle through the portal
Yeah.
and inhabit the interior of these bags. And you could see I could walk, I could roll, I could jump, I could, um, uh, to me, it was a great uh, freedom, but also a great metaphor for what women experience in their bodies all the time. This sort of veneer of it's a veneer of protection, a veneer of uh, shame sometimes. It's like a compartment.
Yes.
Uh, it's a blindness.
Yes.
It holds all of these assumptions about who's being merchandised and who's being transported and who's being delivered. Um, the performance sites that I chose, each one of the 10 of them, each one of them had stage-like appeal. Like one is a amphitheater in the woods where sometimes they put on theatrical performances in the summer. Another is a set of stairs going up the hill where there's a fountain at the bottom, and it's just dramatic, but
Hmm.
very few people are there ever. The location is that performance was, I did it on Veterans Day, and it's up in the Marin Headlands, which is a national park. But there are a lot of old batteries from the war when on the West Coast we were on the lookout for invasion from the Japanese. So there was a whole military installation there, and gun embattlements, which is what this surface
Wow.
is,
Yeah.
where they were on the lookout and ready.
Yeah.
They were ready.
Yeah.
Um, Now it's a beautiful view, walk along the ocean with the bluffs, and there's an artist compound there and a marine mammal center there. And but I went up there by myself and staged this performance. And
Yeah.
uh,
Well, that's was so exciting and curious to me. I mean, I mean, there's some part of it that has humor to it. Like I just want to laugh all the way through. But
yeah.
then I think, we like there's so many things I do that
Mhm,
I think are very serious. And then I have this moment of, wow, this is so absurd, my seriousness about
mhm,
this. And I
mhm,
laugh at myself.
mhm.
But, also the other connotations like that you touch on about body and, you know, the feeling trapped or maybe those are my own words, but like not being able to get your limbs out and your hands out and to do. And I think that was one of my questions early on was about, performance, about using the body, about, I
Mhm,
mean, a certain, I mean, maybe for me, it would feel uncomfortable or this shyness, but I was so intrigued by your interest in doing this like without any audience, with just taking yourself and doing this, you and the camera and
mhm,
everything
mhm,
else that you engaged with.
mhm,
So I asked you about body and um, just how do you feel making these and what comes up for you as you're doing performance and what kind of history about body do you feel is important that you bring out, or maybe it's not just about body anyway.
I think it's part of my practice that is just honoring myself.
Mhm.
And very often the performance pieces where I'm taking self-portraits are during a period in which I have very little time for my own creative practice.
Mm,
And staging something and doing something is like it's a it's validating and it's a release. It's like, yes, I'm fucking here
yes,
again.
yes,
And uh the the video pieces, I did those because I really wanted to teach myself video editing.
mm,
It seemed like the world was changing as an artist, and so much was happening on these machines.
yeah,
And, video editing was much more approachable. This was already many years ago. So it's gotten, a lot more uh, accessible even since then. So I was experimenting. I
mhm,
wanted to see what made sense for me,
right.
what I could have fun doing, and
And so when you're doing your editing, I'm sure it's like it's just as important what you don't have in there, you know
mhm. Yeah, yeah,
needed
yeah,
things. We had one incredible minute. That was one
yeah,
minute, that video. All
yeah, yeah, yeah.
right, let's go to your next images.
I've forgotten what they are. What are we talking about now?
So we've just done
Oh,
the
uh-huh.
carrying,
Mm-hmm.
and let's see, we can go through quickly and see so you can see what's up next, next, next. And if you like, you could talk about these as a group,
Yeah.
and then we'll get to the wallets. Let's talk about the, just tell us about your handles, your printmaking, your carrying?
So there was a proposal I needed to write a few years ago. It was for a very fancy residency, and two people who believe in me encouraged me to apply. It was way beyond my reach. And I just want to say artists are doing this all the time, dreaming of something,
Mhm.
a residency or exhibition, and coming up with a proposal, finding the words that really honor their own identity and curiosity. And as a process of writing this proposal, I realized that what really resonated with me was an essay I had read by Ursula Le Guin, The Carrier Bag Theory of Fiction. And this was the year before um, some of this work showed up in the Venice Biennial. So it was sort of like there was certain traction about this idea of reframing our cultural awareness about stuff and things.
Mhm.
Uh, in the Le Guin essay, she talks about uh, what if, when early humans were beginning to become resourceful, what if instead of valuing the stone and the stick that that killed, uh, we valued the thing that carried the things that were most important, like the seeds,
Mm.
or the cultural tokens that were so important. So you had to create the thing that carried the things.
Mm.
And I really sat with that for a long time, wondering how different our culture would be if we were more peaceful, for one, but also sharing our stories
Mhm.
with authenticity
Mhm.
and caring for each other. And I think we've really are struggling now to tell our cultural stories
Mhm.
and to be aware of how outside of our phones there needs to be a dialogue that is perpetuated amongst friends and generations,
Mhm.
because there will be a day when we won't have these phones, I'm afraid,
Mm.
when we won't have this juice of information coming our way. So, um, part of exploring the things that carry things, I had to narrow the scope a little bit. So I began focusing on the iconic brown paper bags,
Mhm.
plastic bags, curse them, but they keep coming, curse them again. So paper bags, plastic bags, and woven bags. And in these images, you're seeing the how I responded to the brown paper bag by printing it and learning over time that the handle portion of the paper bag was the most interesting,
Yes.
because the how to grasp the thing that carries the things, or how that graphically makes space for ingredients to fill the void, telling the story of the things that carry things. So
Yes, I like that. The word grasp,
yeah.
grasping the understanding and grasping the
Hmm.
barrier
Hmm. Yeah,
for the what's
yeah,
important.
yeah, yeah.
And
So
then
it's just me grinding on an idea, and the last image with the hand around the pages, those are 10 book covers, and this next year I'll be working on the contents that will go
oh,
in these
okay, great.
books.
Yes, yes.
And it's like bookmakers, the last thing they design and fabricate is the cover, but I am doing things the
Right.
opposite way.
That's
I have 10 covers and now I'm going to create the contents and uh, there'll be two signatures in these books. The one side will be content about care, and the other will be about caring. So there'll be some text and some imagery,
mm,
and some of it will be scanned from my printed work and be have a digital output so that I can have a volume of images to go in the books.
when you say a digital output, how is that going to work?
Well, you get a digital file of any of the monoprints,
Uh-huh.
like say the seeds, for instance, and you scan it, and then you use a printer
Okay.
to output the image. Like you can choose your paper, so it can be it'll probably be a very poetic thin page of paper, but I'll output you know, 10 versions of that image, and then it can be cut and folded and seen in the book. So the monoprints are beautiful in person.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that being able to get reproductions of those in this book, that
Yes.
it'll sort of spread the beauty in a very tactile way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we talked about these a little bit, when we all got together on
Mm.
Crit Lab, like I just saw these as as negatives or, scans or as, kind of being,
Mhm. They do have an X-ray quality,
yes.
like they're seeing through
I love
something.
monoprints and printing, and
Mhm.
that's what you do too. And
Yeah.
these are just fabulous, like
Mhm.
prints of the. Hey, when
Mhm.
I asked you about digitally, I mean, it crossed my mind, like just having this bag and then opening it and there be a digital image, like an
Uh-huh.
actual iPad inside where we'd see that video, like when we open up a paper bag, uh,
Mhm.
that could be. And then you have this series with the wallet
Yeah,
based on your
I
mom's wallet.
yeah, this is literally my mom's wallet, and when she carried it, I always like, "Mom, that's a stupid wallet. You're always fumbling with it. This little old lady, it's like a disaster." And then when she passed away, I held the wallet in my hand and I needed to carry it, and I carried it for 11 years and I mended it, repaired it several times, and finally it got to the point where I needed to just stop using it. So of course I wanted to print it.
Yeah,
Uh, and I also had started to really love the form of a wallet, which is sort of like a book cover, but not a book cover. I like that there are two pockets, and the whole discussion of what wallets were not too long ago and what wallets are now. Like I remember when wallets had like that's where you carried your favorite family photos
yeah,
and your most precious little love notes sometimes were in your wallet, receipts, a
right.
credit card, cash,
Yeah.
uh, so I think it's a very poetic object, and I have a whole set of these. I have some right beside me, these fiber forms from repurposed material around the house, curtains or sheets or clothes, and I like exploring natural dyes and paint, and I also love stitching. The cuffs in this image are from my father's dress shirt.
Yeah.
So this piece is mother's wallet, father's cuffs.
Oh, isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you inked your plate, it looks like, and then you pressed them and ran it over there to do over it.
Yeah, it's I always ink up two plates,
Hmm.
two different colors. And the plates are not thick plexi. They're just thin pieces of mylar that I ink up.
Okay.
So two different colors. I'll lay one down on the etching press and arrange the objects on it. And then I'll put the other color of inked acetate on the top and run it through the press. So now the objects are inked up, one color on one side and one color on the other.
Okay.
Uh, so then I can arrange them
Right.
so that this primarily you're seeing the ghost from the inked plate that the objects have been removed from.
Hmm.
Uh, and then sometimes I think if you move forward one or two, so that's the red version of the inked plate. And then this is the objects themselves,
Wow.
inked on both sides, and those are sent through the press with paper, objects, paper.
Yeah.
So it's always a mirror.
Right. Oh, that's beautiful.
And to me, the mirror is it's a form of dialogue.
Right.
Uh,
So beautiful. Thank you for telling us about that.
mhm. This is a more recent, fresh off the press, recent last week, I guess. I was thinking there's so much scarcity, water scarcity in the world, clean water, uh, that I went to the iconic paper cup. I
Yeah.
mean, we all use water bottles now, but we used to always use paper cups. And I deconstructed them and I use them as the objects to be inked and arranged. And it's a beautiful geometry, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah. The
yeah,
overlay and
yeah.
just the directionality, the sparseness, the color choices.
Hmm. And then this was 2 days of exploring plastic bags. The bottom surface is, just the the thinner ones that all your produce from the grocery store gets tossed into.
Yeah.
Not so much in Berkeley anymore. You can only use recyclable green plastic or bring your own. And this is exploring woven things in the same way. And there's a mirror of this as well. So this is really recent. So using an older print where the line in the background is from cassette tape that my dad had recorded of Requiem. So cassette tape makes a beautiful inked line. So I had this sort of tangle from that work, and the bold graphic black line on the surface is something I did years ago. I was learning how to do screen printing, and I took a picture of some knitted fiber, and then I zoomed in on it. And I exposed my screen with the zoomed in knotted line of the knitted material. So it's the title of this piece is Remembering and Forgetting Craft.
Uh-huh.
So the fiber pieces suspended from the bottom are this beautiful, very raw sheep's wool that a friend, friends, they know what you like, and sometimes they send you these things, and it's been looking at me on my shelf. What am I going to use that beautiful, curly,
Yeah.
angelic sheep's wool for? So it really made the third tier in the progression of the
Yes.
tape line, the knotted line, and the raw material.
Yep. Yep. Wonderful combination.
Mhm, mhm.
Mm. I could just feel it. Like
Yeah,
I could feel the embossed quality.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. So, well, there you go. This is my most recent self-portrait. I don't know, you have to look, but that's my hand in the middle, and it's a reflection in the front window, my
Oh,
living room. I realized my hand was out there, and yet it was here.
yeah. It's awesome.
So.
Wonderful. Well, that gave us a lot to understand and learn more about you. And um, I just, it's wonderful to see that you can go in and out of all these practices. And so I imagine, and I think this is true, you don't feel like, oh, I have to stick with this material and this process, and then I'm staying here and now it'll be something new. You can weave in and out of all of these processes however you like at any given time.
I get bored very easily, and I always like to experiment. I'll have a project that has a longer lifetime,
Hmm.
like the care and caring. I mean, I'm going to be stuck with that for a while, but there'll be many different ways I enter it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
well, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. And
Did we do it, Bonnie? Did we
I
do
think
it?
we did it. I
Uh-huh.
I feel enlightened and honored, and I really
Mhm.
appreciate you sharing all of this. Is there anything you want to tell us about like your your work, where we can find it, or where you would like it to be seen, or ideas that you have coming up, or anything else you'd like to add into this? And who knows, maybe we'll do a follow-up at some point.
Yeah. Well, I think there are many people who identify themselves as artists, artists who are not in the fancy galleries, artists who are, um, searching for venues that have some wall space. And I think that it's a great sadness for the majority of artists that there are not enough, there isn't a high enough regard
Right.
for the ongoing work of the legion of creative people doing cool stuff.
Yes.
And it's really a cultural failing, I think, for us. I think that it's my dream that there would be more community spaces where local artists would be, their work would be valued. And I mean, local artists who don't have their MFA, but who have been creating, just like bosses their entire life.
Yes.
And I think that it's a sadness that so much of this work is hidden.
Hmm.
And uh, I think that's my story, and it's one of the reasons why I'll fool around with Instagram or video stuff, just to try to broaden my scope a little bit.
Well, I think that's 100% true.
Mhm.
There's so much great work being made, and
Mhm.
so relatively few ways of getting it out there. And
Yeah, yeah,
we, most people, most artists want to share their work. They want
yeah,
to,
yeah.
and there's these built-in systems that are really challenging. And yeah, I agree. Couldn't agree more. But I hope this brings a lot more people to seeing you and your work.
My fan club will grow exponentially, no doubt.
And why not? And it, well,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Susan. And
Thanks for
I
the
will
invite.
put some notes on the once the recording is up, and I'll
Okay,
put some notes to where people can find you and your work. So
very good.
thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Bonnie. Have a beautiful evening.
You as well. Bye.
Bye.
I'm going to stop.